and disintegrate. Years roll along and fade. Don't let them slip away. Right here, right now, today. These are the good old days. Right here, right now, today. Hey, these are the good old days.
All right, well, welcome to GoFigure. We're once again doing something a little bit different than we usually do. One of the things I've really enjoyed about being in this online YouTube collector space is meeting like-minded people and fellow collectors that just like to have a good time, to chat toys, and to see interest in other people's collections. We all collect differently. We all collect different stuff, but we all collect on the same space and at the same time. So. Joining us tonight is Ken from Kennections. And how you doing, Ken?
Doing great, doing great. Glad to be on. The one thing I will say up front is whenever I log into your channel and I watch one of your videos, you've got that, I think it's called Good Old Days, is your theme song?
Yeah.
So that takes you right back to the 1980s. Right, because it's just got that vibe to it, like whether it's a sitcom or whether it's a drama or a kids show. So now I get to be on the other end of that theme song. So like now I get to listen to the theme song and I get to see my face.
That's right.
It's kind of cool, right? Because I like how you set it up. So it's like it's humbling and an honor to like, oh cool, I get to be on the other side of the opening credits on this one. I like it. I don't know.
That's
the
right.
80s, right?
So, but that song is actually like 4 years old. It was written by a Canadian artist, Danny Michel, and I met him years ago when I was working in a music store, and he kind of came in, was a customer of mine, and we kind of became friends with that. So when I was putting the channel together, I loved the song, and I was like, originally I was going to write my own theme song, but then when I heard that one, I was like, well, why try and do better than this? This is exactly what I need it to be. So then I sent him a message like, hey, like, can I use this song on my channel? Like, you okay with that? And he was like, yeah, no problem. So then I sent him some Playmate Star Trek figures as a thank you. So that's the payment for using the song with some action figures. So it was exactly the spirit of the show.
You could have had me fooled, because I really thought it was an old song. I didn't realize it was an indie artist. And see, I just looked up copyright free songs that you could just credit that actually have on YouTube that say you can use this if you credit it. That's the only thing I do, right? And I don't.
Yeah.
There wasn't as much selection, so at least you got something that fit the exact vibe you were looking for.
Yeah, no. When I heard the song, I was like, that's the one we need. So he's a really cool guy. He actually has a show that if you haven't seen it, you should check it out. This is actually funny because you're out in BC and I'm in Ontario, and so he found an old 70s van, like boogie van, that was done up like Star Trek. And so in BC, so he flew to BC, bought the van, and then drove it back to Ontario. But he made a YouTube show called Dan's Space Van, where he drives across the country. And so he drives across the country looking at Star Trek collections and then having musical guests sing songs in his van. So he's had like Chris Hadfield, the astronaut, in. He had like Alan O'Dale from Great Big Sea. He's had Blue Rodeo in there. So it's called Dan's Space Van. You should check it out. It's pretty groovy. I think you'll get a kick out of it.
You know, he made an adventure out of it, which is kind of cool. I've actually seen Great Big Sea live. I'm not really a folk music guy, but around 2009, I got dragged into a concert. The atmosphere is actually pretty good.
Oh, it's a party.
We're here to talk toys, but I found a little bit more in common with you. Like I used to own a guitar and I used to play guitar. I sold it around the time my kid was born, so I only got to a certain level. Like about the hardest song I could play was "Nothing Else Matters" by Metallica. It's about the hardest song I could play, right?
There you go.
Is kind of like the entry level into, okay, you can jam now, is what I always look at it as. So.
Exactly, right? Just like as long as you can, and this is maybe a handoff. When guitar players start playing, the question is really like, who's better? Are you better, or is Tim better? Or are you better, or is Sean better? Who's better? And you get to a point where you don't care who's better. You just want to play with other people, right? You just want to be in that space together. And I think when it comes to toy collecting, we oftentimes, when we start our collections, we want to have impressive pieces. We want to have cool. We want to collect the stuff that we like. But there's this weird competition going on, and like, oh, I was at a toy show a couple weeks ago, and I was with my buddy, and he had some stuff for sale, and this guy came by and looked at the table, and he's like, well, I got a better Moss Man than that. And it's like, great, then don't buy this one. Go home and enjoy your Moss Man. Like, there's this weird like competitive streak there sometimes, and I think. Now, I say mature, but we're all collecting toys. But I think a mature collector just enjoys the art of collecting, enjoys his collection, and just like you have behind you a very different collection than I have behind me. But like I love that that's your collection, and I love that this is my collection, and we can be in the same space and just enjoy that. But there's certain threads that are common no matter what kind of toy collecting we're into, and so we're gonna kind of talk about two of those tonight, and we're gonna talk about holy grails and crown jewels, which are out there terms that we as toy collectors know what they mean. Well, and they know what they mean to us. I think if you ask all the toy collectors in the world, they may interpret those differently. But in my mind, a holy grail is a figure that you've heard about. It's more of a myth than anything, and it's out there. You've rarely seen one in the wild. They usually have a big price tag, but they'd be something fantastic for your collection if you ever came across one. Yep. And a crown jewel is something that may not be rare, but it's something fundamental you want to build your collection around.
There we go.
And
there we go.
I think every line has a crown jewel, and I think every line to some extent has a holy grail. They may just not be as rare as other ones. So we're going to talk about kind of those today. But if I were to ask you, Ken, as a collector, what was your first holy grail find that you found? And was it in the wild? Was it online? Was it a big purchase? What was the scoop?
Okay. This has taken me all the way back. I had to stop and think. I'm like, ooh, I might give the wrong answer and have to correct myself later in the show. But I see it right there. And I actually did a video on my 10 rarest G1 Transformers. And it's funny how you mentioned the competition thing, because when I posted that online, one of the guys I know pretty well locally, he goes, oh yeah, Ken, nice flex on your collection. Let me show mine. And I was like, no. I wasn't flexing at all. Like, if I've been collecting since, I want to say Christmas of 2002, hopefully I've found 10 rare Transformers by now. Like, and it's okay to share that. That was the way I was going about it. But anyway, to answer your question, in that video, in the top 3 was my blue Estrela Brazilian Bumble Jumper figure. I don't know if you know the story behind Bumble Jumper from Transformers. You do? Okay. So for the people who don't know out there, he was a micro change figure that was accidentally, I heard, carded and put with the 1984 set. And for some reason, I guess this was not on purpose, the mold made its way to Brazil and they released him in the blue, the white, a few other colors. And I managed to get the blue one over at the Ages 3 and Up back in 2004 at like a member gathering. I just bought it off another member and I didn't say what I paid for it in the video, but I'll say it here. I paid 40 bucks Canadian for it, right?
That's not bad.
And I've never seen one in the wild. And I've had people come to me and say, I'd like to offer you hundreds of dollars on it. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, here's the problem. There's a connection to that story. Right. Yeah. It's not about buying it for 40 and selling it for several hundred. Right. I've never seen one again. I was 22 years old when I got it. Right. Yeah. I've never seen one again. A lot of my friends haven't seen it again. I like the mini bots. I wanted a Bumble Jumper of some sort, and I got it. Yeah. That was the first one that I got. And the funny thing about that one is that's not even as pricey as some of the other figures, because it's one of those people, they look at it and think, oh, it's just a mini bot. I don't want to pay $2,000 for it or something.
Right.
But having said that, it's a hard one to find. So I'll state that as being the first holy grail that I found.
That's sweet. I think my first big holy grail figure was when I was collecting the Sectars. Mm-hmm. And so they made Prince Dargon, and then they made the single carded one without the beast. It was night fighting Prince Dargon when he was silver. But the tool disintegrated. There was a problem with the tool, so they had to make a new tool. And on it, they made the star in his chest smaller. So it's common to have a small star one, but to have one with a star in his chest the same size as the original Dargon is apparently very, very rare. And so I was just in like a vintage toy store digging through a bin, and I found the night fighting Dargon with the big star, and I was like, oh, don't freak out. And it was $5. So I was able to pick that up, and I came home, and I was like, and that was actually, it was the last one I needed to get all the figures with all the variants. And so I was able to get that. And again, I think like they go, maybe if people know what they have, they go for like 45, 50. Like it's not a very expensive one, but it was like the rarest of that line. And it was something I was looking forward to complete. So it was a pretty cool moment.
But Sectars is also a bit of a niche market, right? So whatever, regardless of the value, if you can talk to your Sectars friends and they go, wow, and they're impressed by the fact that you get it, still makes it something of a hard piece to find. And I like what you said there about Holy Grails versus crown jewels, because like if I look behind you there, right, some of the play sets you have, we see them all the time, but you build your collection around, in Masters of the Universe, you build your collection around Castle Grayskull and Snake Mountain. Something that's a Holy Grail would be obviously the Wonder Bread He-Man that you and I have talked about, right? And I actually have the Masters of the Universe Classics one. I was going to make a video on it at some point. But something that in my mind is both a Holy Grail and a crown jewel, you probably know what I'm going to say, is Eternia. That's an example of something that's probably both. And same with G.I. Joe, right? Is, you know, the flag is both a Holy Grail and a crown jewel, and so is the Terrordrome. But like the rare Argent 7 figures that go for, you know, a couple grand a piece complete, those are just straight up Holy Grails, right? But a crown jewel could be, and you can't see it because it's up there, but like the Rolling Thunder would be a piece you could build around because it's a big piece, right? Or the 83 headquarters or something, right? So I like that you and I are on the same wavelength the first 5 minutes of the call. So it'll show the collector mind.
Exactly. That's good. And I think it's neat too, whatever version of Masters of the Universe you collect, Grayskull is such a pivotal thing that you kind of need to have, right? Like you see guys that are into the Origins line, and Grayskull is like, I love on the Facebook groups are like, we got some, you know, they're giving out addresses like where they are, so guys can go get their Castle Grayskull, because it's such a pivotal, iconic thing. Like people that don't collect will walk into your collection and be like, hey, Castle Grayskull, that's cool, and it's like so recognizable kind of right away, right? And
it is.
Yeah, so that was one too. So I had like a smaller Motu collection for a while. It wasn't big on my radar. Like I had a few that I had when I was a kid, but I was more into like superpowers, and I got really into like, again, the smaller 80s lines that had like the one waves. So like Visionaries and Sectars and, you know, Dick Tracy and like all these kind of one wave wonders. And then
Cops. I see it on the wall there. Is that Cops?
That's Cops. Well, Cops was right here.
Okay, sorry.
Behind me. Yeah. No, I love the Cops line. Like that was so cool. But then I found like just a Grayskull shell for like $20, and I picked it up and I was like, oh, it's so cool. It's so cool. And you start going from there. That's where it starts. And once you have that catalyst to build it around, you know, and sometimes it's like one figure, sometimes it's a vehicle, like Captain Power. Like if you get an XT7 jet, then all of a sudden you're like, well, we're gonna go ahead and get all these figures. Because again, that's another one line wonder, and you can get those figures for the most part pretty easily, right? But I would say the crown jewel of that line would be the XT7 jet, and the Holy Grail would be, you know, the pilot figure, like the one female figure that, you know, is a little harder to get. And again, if you look, she's not that hard, but she's harder than the most. And I'm very open that I have a rule with my collection, is that I don't do any eBay. It's against my rules. I have to find things in the wild. Right.
I had no choice sometimes. And I like that you mentioned the female figure there, because they always hesitated to make them in the 80s, right? Like Transformers never released RC, Cops never released Mainframe, or, you know, Misdemeanor or Nightshade or Mirage, right? G.I. Joe is one of the lines that did it. Obviously, wrestling had the managers, or at least they had Miss Elizabeth. But you're right, they always hesitated to release female characters. And eBay, I'm not quite as strong-willed as you. Because when I did make a video on my Heart Foundation collection, as you know, Mattel never released, and Jakks never released a proper 7-inch scale Owen Hart. Obviously, they're making one now. I think AEW, Jazzwares, maybe.
Yeah, Jazzwares got the rights for it.
Yeah, so, but at the time, I didn't know that a year ago, so I ended up splurging on one on eBay, right, and finding 2 Slammy awards for it and having him hold it. You know, he might even be here somewhere where I can almost reach it if I reach hard enough. Yeah. He's right there somewhere. A little hard to see, but he's there.
Yeah, the Owen Hart figure, you know, hunt has been a weird one for ever since, you know, even Jakks took over in, like, what was it, like 97, 98 was when Jakks took over the
around there. They were really prominent in 98, but they may have had the license in 97. You know, while we're talking about him, I'm going to make an attempt to knock my phone down, and
he's going to knock everything over. It's going to be incredible. Action figure dominoes are coming up.
Okay, well, I managed to knock Brett over.
There you go.
He's the older brother, but this is the Owen Hart, for example, right?
That's a great looking Owen, right?
Yeah, and Nelson actually, from the toy groups that we're in, actually was the one who sent me the jacket.
Oh, sweet.
and actually the Intercontinental title, but that's just a standard Mattel Intercontinental title. So
Yeah.
that's one of the semi gems of my collection. Like it's not one of those that's super duper high priced, but you just don't see it very often, right?
Well, and the thing is too with the Owen Hart thing, there was never like a standard Owen figure. It was always like somebody's interpretation of that. So no two are the same, right? Like there's some recipes out there, but again, anytime you're doing a custom work, unless you're mass producing them, they're going to be a little bit different. So I think it's cool whenever you see an Owen Hart. It's always like a little bit off kilter. But yeah,
like the sunglasses are held together by an elastic.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Literally, right? In the front it looks fine, but on the back it's an elastic. So there you go. I like this. We've even got wrestling in common. We got all these toy lines. I was kind of a musician back in the day. And so you can tell we grew up in almost basically the exact same age group. I was born in '82. I think I heard somewhere you were born in '81.
81,
so
yeah.
we were, you know, yeah, we were in the same playground together, kind of thing, generally speaking. Other sides of the country, but yeah.
Yeah, other sides of the country, but you know, but it's strange like when you talk to American collectors and how different their landscape was as a kid to like what we had in Canada. Like I think in the '80s we were always like 6 months behind, kind of where they were.
Yes.
Right, give or take. And so there's just stuff that we, you know, heard about and never saw. Like I have zero memories of seeing a Silverhawk in a toy store as a kid.
And neither do I. I remember seeing them when I started going to toy shows, like, you know, a few years ago.
Yeah.
Right. But like even like when I was in 1989 for a birthday, I got the Mobile Command Center GI Joe, and I swore up and down that it was new. Come to find out later, it was released in '87. So what the heck were we doing having that thing, you know, in the toy store, right?
Yeah.
Or like how the last wave of wrestling superstars was only released here, or at least I think it was. I had somebody correct me before and say that they've seen it overseas. I'm like, yeah, but they may have shipped overstock overseas.
Maybe,
so,
but it was LJN. The rights were bought by Grand Toys in Canada. It was a Canadian company.
And they were Canadian.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And we had no idea that it was a Canadian exclusive. Like the internet wasn't a thing, so we were just like, oh, there's more wrestlers coming out. And
I would see them, and I would just assume they were mass produced. Come to find out later that Andre and the Blackstrap and Ultimate Warrior are really hard to find.
Yeah, so, like I got Warrior, Rude, and Boss Man, and for Christmas on Christmas morning, and I was just like, oh, this is sweet. And my buddy across the road got them as well. And we're like, oh, and we had no idea that we had like, you know, and again, I'd say the Warrior LJN is like a crown or a holy grail of that line, right? That's the one that when you find it, it's gold.
So is the Andre. Yep, those are the two from that set, the Andre and the Warrior. I think that are worth the most. Yeah. Well, maybe if you had the Nightstick on Boss Man, maybe it's more. I don't know. I'd have to look at prices again.
Yeah, but again, all that wave, right? Like those are the ones that really go. And it's crazy too when you think like you don't know what they're like. For what rhyme or reason it's going to be, that's going to be the one that's expensive. Like that's the one that's.
Oh yeah, well the Sergeant Slaughter is technically more expensive than those, but it was released by Hasbro, so it's like, I guess it's the holy grail of the line, even though it's released by a different company.
Yeah, that one's a bit like the LJN like deep cut, like collecting stuff. It gets crazy. So do you have a Slaughter? Do you have I know you're a big Slaughter guy. Here it comes. Look at this. There he is. Ooh, that is a minty fresh one, my friend.
In person, it's not quite as minty fresh. I didn't quite come prepared, so I didn't know that what I would be pulling out for this conversation. I know you wanted to talk Holy Grails when we first talked about this, but there's a bit of paint splotches. The hat's a little bit frazzled here, but yeah, it was one of those that Toy Traders luckily is here. I did a tour of their GI Joe section a while ago. I bought this Christmas of 2019, and everyone was like, I think you paid $50 too much. Come to find out later, the price would just keep going up. So it was one of those, I gambled. And when I say gamble, I just mean gambled for the sake of my collection. I wasn't going to turn around and sell this thing anytime soon, at least. Right.
No, so, and that's the thing. Yeah. I think there's definitely two kinds of people that are into collecting. There's the ones that want to turn it and make a profit. And there's the ones that realize that it's only going to cost me money. Like I'm never going to see any money generated by this hobby, right? Like that's not at all what we're in for. And so, my big thing, I pick up the Chuffa left over. Like I'm huge in like the bin figures and then like fixing them up and that's the whole premise of our show. So like I have no pride in like, oh, you know, buying the cheap ones and giving them a little bit of paint, a little bit of cleaning, a little bit of love. It's pretty fun actually.
I'm guilty of both though, because I do set up at the toy shows here. So there are times when I'll buy a big collection. But
Yeah.
what started to happen, I started to get this tendency of buying stuff, upgrade the figure, sell the old one,
Yeah.
or someone was really dumping a collection cheap and there was one figure I needed. I remember when I wanted to buy an entire Ghostbusters collection. All I needed was Winston's ghost. And the guy was like, you got to buy the whole collection. And I'm like, can I just give you like $20 for that piece? Which at the time in 2016, that was more than fair for that. I was probably overpaying in 2016. He's like, no, you got to buy the whole collection. So I bought the whole collection, plucked that piece, and put the rest on my table for the toy show. And that's partly, not the whole story, but that's partly how my tables were born at the toy show. Because like I said, I've been collecting a lot longer, but I didn't start doing toy shows as a vendor until about 5 years ago. And that's one of the things that pushed me in that direction. I was like, well, I'm just accumulating stuff now. Let me see what it costs to get a table. And then, you know, you might make a little bit of money, but you're also keeping stuff for yourself. So
And so I did the same thing with like, you know, your doubles and your extras and the stuff that you just kind of accumulate throughout the years, because there's that swell. And like you say, you know, you can see an upgraded figure, and if you see like a cheap enough figure, you just upgrade it. You don't think about it, and that's why like I have a crazy collection of like Dick Tracy figures, like actually just Dick Tracy the character, and a collection of like Superpower Superman. Because whenever I see a nice one that's cheap, I'm like, oh, I'll get that. Oh yeah, that's better than I got, and so you end up with a bunch of them. You know, because it's just you know they're cheap enough and they're not in demand. And like Dick Tracy's the figures, whether they're squeaky clean or just like beat up, they're like a couple bucks. So I'm like, for $2, it's a nice Dick Tracy. I got to pick it up. So I have this weird collection of like Dick figures. You're
always, whenever I hear you talk superpowers, you're always tempting me into it, because I grew up with superpowers when I was about 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So whenever I see you doing something superpower related, I'm a little tempted to dive in. Next.
Like I think like for the 80s there isn't a better looking toy line. I think they nailed the colors, they nailed everything, you know what I mean? They have, you know, and that's a funny one where the holy grails from that one are kind of like weird characters. So like Cyborg would be the holy grail from that line, right? Yes. But then like the next one would be like Golden Pharaoh, and you're like, and like Samurai, and you're like, what? Who? These are such weird characters. Like I don't even like necessarily want them in my collection.
There's no connection. I found a DC Universe Classics Pharaoh a couple of years ago, and I was like, who's this guy again? So it was, you know, unfortunately for me, I started, well, fortunately or unfortunately, after I started doing what I was mentioning to you, would buy some collections, keep a couple pieces, and sell the rest. People just started coming to me and saying, you wanted to buy the whole collection? And if the price is really good, I'm like, well, I got a show next month. I see a piece I could upgrade. And you start falling down the rabbit hole where you start becoming a vendor, but you don't want to do it too much because it starts to become a full-time thing. And like I started doing sales on Facebook, and I started realizing there was months of my life and months where all I was doing was packing boxes to ship them across the country. And I'm just like, man, this is okay. This is fun. It's supplying my fellow collectors, but it's starting to drain my energy a little bit. You know what I mean? And then I stopped after a while. You upgrade enough, you stop looking at your collection, and you just like, okay, I got to downsize this pile, right?
Yeah.
And I've had it happen before where I go, damn, that figure over there had 2 elbow cracks on the GI Joe. And I just sold a minty when I totally forgot to upgrade it. So there's all these things and all these factors at play, even when you're trying to upgrade a collection. But no, back to what you were saying about Golden Pharaoh. I don't even remember him as a character. I just remember picking up a DC Universe Classics figure sometime in 2018 or 19 and being like, who's this guy?
Yeah. So, yeah, they're weird ones. But I would say that the crown jewel of the Superpowers line is simply the Superman figure, right? That to me is the centerpiece you build that collection around. It's because he's so iconic. And again, that figure to me is so perfect. Like he's just a perfect action figure. And so he's probably the most available of the figures. You can get him nice and cheap. But without him, there's no collection in my mind. Right, that's kind of where
it's because Christopher Reeve was so iconic at that time. He was at the height of his popularity when that figure came out. So I think everybody just, at least, well, I know I do. I think a lot of people do as well. They just associate that figure with Christopher Reeve.
100%.
Right? Yeah. And I think people just generally associate the Batman and Robin from that line, even those earlier from 1966, they just associate it with Adam West and Burt Ward naturally, because Keaton didn't come till after, right? So, and also because it's the gray and blue version of Batman, so people just associate it with that, right? And I don't know, do we associate the Wonder Woman from that line with Linda Carter?
I think because Super Friends was on at the time, that was kind of where it went. I think Wonder Woman didn't survive in the reruns like Batman did as a child.
Okay, fair enough.
Right? Like,
fair
I think
enough. That's what I was going next, was if you're not associating with that, you're associating with Super Friends.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, I think, again, like that Superman, to another extent, like Superman, Batman, and Robin, like that trio, you get that, and even those three look great in a shelf, and the collection can grow from there. But that's kind of, that's what you need, that centerpiece for the line. It's not it's not the most expensive thing, but it's just, that's where it is. And it's like, and with wrestling figures, I think it comes down to like era, because wrestling is a weird one, because for a while, like every 5-6 years, the scale would change completely, and it would be like a whole different toy. And then it wasn't until Jakks came along that we got like a comprehensive cross section of like, okay, here's wrestlers from different companies from different eras that are all going to kind of be in the same scale. And then of course Mattel took it to the next level and really said, here, just have any wrestler you ever want. But I think when it comes to that, and maybe I'm wrong here, I don't know, you're clearly a big wrestling collector, but I think it comes down to like, if you're in the Hogan era, or if you're in the Rock era, Stone Cold era, or like, I don't know if there's anybody as iconic as after Stone Cold and the Rock that was a champion, like that you just associate as the top champion, because the belt started changing hands so quickly.
So I'm glad we're not live right now, because the name I'm going to bring up is going to be one that everybody rolls their eyes at, and you know who I'm going to say.
Yeah, John Cena, for
sure.
John
Cena, right? So that's one that people. I personally don't. When I heard how much John Cena was doing behind the scenes in terms of being such a humanitarian, doing all the Make-A-Wish stuff, and how he really embraced being a public face of the company more than anybody else, that's where my respect for him grew. Right. But in my mind, with all the guys who came before him, they didn't need that to earn my reverence to be the top guy, right? So for me, that's where it grew, right? Obviously now, some people might argue they're trying to push Roman Reigns there, but there's still some elements. He's doing fine, but there's some elements missing.
Yeah, there's something that's just not organic about their rise to the belt. Like, I remember when Stone Cold beat Michaels at 14, it was like something that non-wrestling fans knew about. They're like, oh, Stone Cold has the belt now. Like, everybody knew that Hogan was the champion, right? And so I think that after that era, and I don't want to be the guy who's like, oh, the Attitude Era was where it was the best. I don't know if it was the best. I know the in-ring quality was great, but those were iconic champions, and I don't think we've had an iconic champion since then. I think we've had a place-holding champion the whole time.
Yeah, I think the matches were really okay. Fine. Later in the Attitude Era, when the tag team started getting involved, then yes, and Angle and Benoit, yes, 99 to 01, the matches were great. It was mostly the in-ring mic work from 97 onwards that carried it more than the matches for me. But you're right. I almost corrected you and said, no, the matches weren't that great, but they were halfway through the Attitude Era. They really, really got good.
Yeah.
And it's because I think Jericho once said it in a documentary that that's the era where you had two number one guys, right? You had The Rock and you had Austin. You never had that, right? Everyone always built around Hogan. Yes, there was Macho Man, but it always felt like Hogan was ahead, right? The new generation era, a lot of people felt never had one. I felt that McMahon always tried to push Bret to be his Macho Man, his number two face. And he always had tried to experiment with who was going to be the next top guy. Like he tried Lex, he tried Diesel, to be his Hogan, and it never happened. He kept going back to Bret, right? So I guess de facto it's Bret, but you can tell Vince gave him the Macho Man treatment. He didn't give him the Hogan treatment. And then when you got to The Rock and Austin, they were just both so unstoppable in terms of their merchandise sales. And the fact, I guess, Vince kind of christened both of them anyway. Like when The Rock came in, he he pretty much strapped the rocket on him anyway. And
Yeah.
you know, and after the Austin 316 promo, Vince just strapped the rocket on Austin anyway. But you're right, it's not as often you see someone, I'll say it again, throw the rocket on
Right.
someone and make them carry the company. Like AEW doesn't really have that top guy. I mean,
No.
CM Punk's a big name, Jericho's a big name.
But they're, again, those guys are ex WWE guys. Like, they have this history before. We're not seeing somebody rise up and take the reins on their own. Like, I think the first guy to do that in AEW is going to be Jungle Boy. Give him 2 years, and I think he's going to be the top guy who, like, has a real emotional journey to the belt. I feel that. I think he's that guy.
Yeah, no, I just started looking up because I started thinking who else, and MJF has that $1 million man heel aspect to him, that DiBiase heel to him. Hangman Page could be something.
Yeah.
I wonder if it'd be Hangman Page before Jungle Boy.
Yeah.
You know, Jungle Boy has charisma, but I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, no, maybe. You could be onto something.
But I just don't know if we're in the era of, like, a long-term title run, right? Like, I just don't know if it's there. Yeah. But going back to what I was coming to is, I think that, you know, those top guys in those early wrestling lines, I think that was what your crown jewel was, like when you had Hogan, right? Whether it be Hasbro's or LJN, when you had your Hogan, that's what you kind of built your federation around. But then, the Holy Grails were those top guys. But the crown jewel you built your thing around was when you got the ring.
Yes.
And then
there you go.
That was a thing that I think changed when Mattel took over, because there was such a mass amount of figures that as a collector, you can't display a ring with those figures because the ring is so big, and then there's nowhere to put the figures, right? Like, it's a whole thing. But
you could throw 2 rings together and try War Games or something. Or
so for a while,
three rings. Yeah.
For a while, I was making elite scale rings, like just homemade rings, and I was selling them online. And I made a guy a War Games one, which is 2 put together. And
I didn't know you did this. That would have been quite a project.
Yeah, I had it down to a pretty cool science. I'll show you some pictures later. And
please do. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll post them on my GoFigure Facebook page if anybody wants to go check them out. But yeah, I put 2 together and made a guy a War Games one, and I was like, this is taking up a lot of shelf space.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the Facebook page, and I was thinking about it before we jumped on the call here. I think your channel and mine, we started, I think, around the same month. Like, I started end of April this year, and you started like beginning of April, and kind of seen us both kind of grow a little bit together. It's been kind of nice to have another, like, person who I can kind of bounce things off of.
Yeah, and like I don't
idea-wise. So
yeah, I don't know what I'm doing, right? I'm just like, let's just throw it at the wall and see what works. And I was fixing up toys in my collection because, like, to go back, you know, some of these holy grails and crown jewels and stuff that we want to have as pivotal pieces in our collection, like, they're just expensive. They're really expensive. So I came to my mind that, like, I'm probably never gonna have a Wonder Bread He-Man in my Motu collection. I'm like, but I want one. So I'm gonna make one. I'm gonna figure out how to, you know, make one up and do a custom job. And I was like, well, if I'm doing this anyways, maybe I'll put it on the internet and see if anybody wants to watch it. And so some people have, you know, come along and said that we want to watch it. So that's funny. And you meet people, and I'm a relationship guy. I want to just do this with people. So, you know, I love just looking at your collection, seeing what makes you tick, and, you know, I love when people come to my office, my collection's in my office, and you know, there's always the reaction of like, oh, this is interesting, which is adult for being like, this is weird, but they're like, this is interesting. Hey, look, it's Skeletor. Hey, look, it's, and they get into it pretty quick, right? Because it's a pretty neat thing. But again, I think it's those crown jewels you build your collection around. Right, yes. Like, definitely when people walk in and see Castle Grayskull, they're like, "Oh, this is a cool collection." Right? When they walk in, they see that Superman figure in the Superpowers collection, they're like, "Oh, I had that," because everybody had that one. So it's an Italian point.
When someone 10 years younger than me, or someone 10 to 15 years older than me, walks into my collection, right now I don't have them displayed, but the first thing they would always gravitate towards was my 6-scale Hot Toys Avengers or Star Wars or Dark Knight. Because it's something that anyone casual can have a look at, and those things are big, right? I've boxed them all away now because I wanted to flesh out the other parts of my collection. But people are always like, oh my God, that's so great. Then they see some of the other stuff and they're like, who's that next to Optimus Prime? You know?
Yeah.
Who's that next to Hulk Hogan? Right? Who's that next to Snake Eyes? Right? It's right. Who's that next to Luke Skywalker? Assuming I've got a more esoteric character. Right? So
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love gauging how deep people want to go. Right? Because I have my Sectars next to my Motu stuff, and everybody knows who He-Man is. It's like he's become an icon. Nobody has any idea who the Sectars are, right? They're like, what is this big bug thing? And I always go like, this is the coolest toy line. Like the whole puppet idea, I don't understand, Ken, why no other toy line has incorporated hand puppets like that since. Like they're genius.
Okay, fine. I was gonna say you do have that snake puppet on the Fright Zone, but it's a little different. It's not quite the same thing.
It was the same. It was kind of the same era, and I think that was. And granted, it's there, but that was a one-off. Whereas like the hand puppet was the basis of the Sectars.
Okay, Sectars. Yeah, fair enough.
Right? Like that was its thing. So like I'd say the crown jewel of a Sectars line is the Dragon Flyer. To have one of those beasts on your hand, that's the thing you can build your collection around.
What about the hive base?
So the hive base is cool. I would say that's a big holy grail for that one. It's massive, so not a lot of people had it as a kid, right? It's very fragile to find one together, and I know it's big. It's not that cool to look at, right? Like you bring it in, and people are like it's nowhere near as recognizable as Grayskull. But when you see the Dragonfly, I would say that the hive could be a holy grail for sure, but it's not a crown jewel. You're not going to build your collection around that. So I have all the figures and I have all the mounts and I have 90% of the accessories. If I never find a hive, I'm okay with that. Like I'm not, because I think the cheapest one I found, and this is again looking online, which I'm not going to buy off eBay, but they're like $1,500. And I'm like, that's a lot of bin figures to fix up. I can put that $1,500 into from getting the hive, right? So
you want me to show you a holy grail you might never see again?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's within arm's reach. I think.
I'm very excited about this. Oh, look at you.
Okay, I'm kidding. It's not real. It's not real.
Easy now.
I was looking for the look in your eyes, like
I was like, "What's happening?"
I think he's doubting me. No, it's actually marked that it's not. It's actually marked by the company that made it. I just thought I'd test you for a second and
I was like,
see
okay.
what first comes to mind.
Well, at first I was like, "This video's gonna get so many comments, but like fake. There's no way." I was like, "We're gonna bring down some serious heat here." So. So do you have a big vintage Star Wars collection? Is that a big deal?
No, I basically have one shelf of vintage Star Wars stuff, but I happened to see this labeled as a repro, so it's not fooling anyone. Rocket firing Boba Fett, and it was like I don't know. I want to say it was I want to say it was 50. No, less than that. I was gonna say 50 American, but I'm pretty sure it was less than that. I forget what I paid with shipping and everything because I shipped it overseas. But yeah, no, I didn't want to blow up the comments in your thread. I just wanted to see how long I could string you along for. I got to about 3 seconds. I'm like, no, I can't lie to this guy.
Yeah, but like for guys born in our era, like 81, 82, by the time I was playing with action figures, Star Wars was gone.
Same.
Right. So like I picked up one or two at yard sales as a kid, but I actually didn't really get into Star Wars until the THX VHSs came out. Remember
I got into it in the 90s myself because my friends would start watching Star Wars and be like, "Oh, cool! I finally get to watch this movie everyone's been talking about."
Yeah.
But yeah, because of the year I was born, I mean, Return of the Jedi came out not long after I was born, and then toys were off the shelf a year or two later.
Yeah, and so for me, the Power of the Force 2 line is way more nostalgic than the vintage Kenner line, right? Like the orange card ones.
I could see that.
Yeah, and I know that no one likes them and they're cheap and they're whatever, but to me, I'm like when I see an orange carded Luke, I'm like that's way cooler to me than a vintage Kenner Luke. Like, I know it's wrong to think that, but I'm like, that's the ones I saw that I first saw in a toy store.
I just like the simplicity and the innocence of the original Star Wars figure. They take you back to a more innocent, simple time before the age
100%.
of super duper high detail and every flaw counts. And,
Oh, absolutely. So I made a huge like decision 4 years ago when I was like, I'm out with modern toys. Like I'm out. And if people love collecting them, that's groovy, and you have a lot of modern stuff. But for me, I was like, I'm chasing nostalgia that I'm never getting. Like I had a huge Superman figure collection, all because I love that '84 Superpowers one. And I was like, well, all I'm doing is trying to capture this feeling. I have it. Like I have the best Superman figure ever. So I don't, because again, it's a more innocent time, and they're kind of perfect in their simplicity. So I was like, I'm just gonna chase the stuff that I had, as opposed to the stuff that is coming out that reminds me of the stuff I had.
right. And that makes sense. I couldn't help it because depending on, maybe I'll ask you a question and then I'll show where I'm going with this. What, unless you never stopped collecting, but most of us took a bit of a break between our childhood and collecting as an adult. What got you back in? Which figure, which toy line?
So it definitely was. So I always love toys, and I would say there's never been a time that I didn't walk through the toy aisle, right? And so we moved from my hometown to a new town when I was in the summer between grade 9 and 10, which was like this weird 6-month period where I was like, I don't need my old toys. So I gave all my old toys away, except for like some LJNs and a couple figures here and there. I just gave them to the neighborhood kids. And then that summer is when Power of the Force 2 came out, and I was like, oh man, those are cool. I think I kind of want those. And then I met a kid at my new high school who was like, yeah, I collect figures. And I was like, oh, okay. I came from a real small town, so like the idea of being an adult figure collector, I was like, what's that? Like that never even popped into my mind. I was like, oh, I'm too old for toys now, thus say society. And then when this guy was like, yeah, I collect the Star Wars figures, and I was like, I guess I can as well. So the Power of the Force 2 figures got me into actively collecting current things. But when I went away to college in 2000, that was the first time I had access to the internet. Before that, I had it at school, but I had my own computer, and I found like the vintage toy collecting world. And I was like, oh, and then I felt right. I was like, I need to get the Superpowers collection. Like I need to have those toys again. So
Okay,
it was
so that was it for you.
the Superpowers line was what got me back in.
Okay, I see. Yeah, so where I was going with that in how to get trapped in modern is Christmas of 2002. My sister was living in Boston because my brother-in-law was doing a medical residency in Boston. So we visited them. And somehow I impulse bought one of the seasons of the Transformers on DVD. So I started watching it while I was there. I just borrowed one of their DVD players, and I just thought, I'd love to get my old collection back. So a week or two later, it's New Year's 2003, and I start finding out that there's local toy shops here, and I start buying Generation 1 Transformers, and I start buying reissues of them, right? And then within a year of me starting back into collecting, they released the MPO1 Masterpiece Optimus Prime. Yep. Boom, the modern trap is set. I just started collecting 12 months earlier, and the modern trap is set. Yeah. So they wanted to commemorate the 20th year of Transformers, so it was like Christmas of 2003 was right before the 20th anniversary. So I would call Takara in Japan releasing it first, and then Hasbro releasing it in the official 20th year. And then a couple of years later, they started releasing classics type figures that were basically modern interpretations. And then as I started reading some Marvel comic stuff, I started collecting Marvel Legends. And that's when I got introduced to the 6-inch scale. That was around 2005, around the time I graduated from university. Yeah. So I still have a few Marvel Legends. I don't have the collection I used to have. I sold off most of it, but I kept a bunch of X-Men. And that's what got me into G.I. Joe Classified later. It's what got me a little bit into Star Wars Black Series. It's partly what circled me back into Cops, because those figures are 6-inch, right?
Those 6-inch figures, and they're tied to Larry Hama. Like, it's incredible.
They are, and what got me officially into Cops is the tie-in, because Checkpoint is written in the bio as the son of Beachhead, right?
Yeah.
Wayne Sneeden and Wayne Sneeden III. I don't know what happened to the second, but they specifically say his father was part of, and they allude to G.I. Joe. So I don't know, was
Yeah.
Beachhead Wayne Sneed in the second? I don't know. It's all technicalities. But displaying Checkpoint next to classified Beachhead, the scale works even if the style is different. And I started mashing up my cops and my G.I. Joe classifieds on the same shelf. So things went back to the vintage yet again. But that's my story of how I got lumped into the modern and how it never stopped.
100%. So it was when I started collecting the Superpowers line again in 2002, 2001. That's when DC Direct came out.
Oh, yes.
The first time you got like a 6-inch, highly detailed, not super articulated, but like a very collector geared.
I remember them.
Action figure. And I bought Hal Jordan and Green Arrow. And I was like, these are incredible. Like I was like, but again, I was buying them because I wanted to get the feeling I had when I had my Superpowers line. So I got this big collection of DC Direct stuff. I still have some of them because, like, open, they're not worth anything to sell. But I was like, okay. So I just fell down that road, and then it was Batman v Superman, which got me out. So I remember standing in line, to add a BVS Superman to my collection. I was like, I hated this movie. Like, I hated it so much. Why am I buying this Superman figure when all I really want is the '84 Superpowers one?
Okay. So I'm guessing that you reacted to the Martha line in that film the same way me and a lot of other people did.
I react like I hate conflict that's unnecessary. And in my job and in my family and in my friends, I'm like, if something's bothering you, let's just talk about it right away so it doesn't ever come up again. And so that was a 3-hour movie that was based on the lack of a 30-second conversation, right?
It did feel that way when I got out of it, and going back a minute or two here, I like how you specifically said DC Direct Hal Jordan, and you didn't just say Green Lantern and leave me to ask which Green Lantern is your Green Lantern. But I think our era, and I guess almost anyone's, is basically Hal Jordan anyway.
Yeah. Well,
who else is there, right? I mean, Alan Scott for the really old school, and then you've got Kyle Rayner for a bit.
Yeah, and there was John Stewart, and there was Guy Gardner.
Oh, yeah, of course. Sorry,
right?
Yes, the Justice League cartoon, it was John Stewart all the way.
Yeah.
And then Kilowog, Gardner, you're right, Gardner had his run.
Yeah, and even DC Direct, they used the same body and did like a Tom Ray and a John Stewart. They really used that Green Lantern body mold a lot. But no, it was Green Lantern was what I wanted because he was in the Superpowers line, right? It was like almost a direct upgrade from that Superpowers Green Lantern. So
I had that as a kid as well. So you're making me miss my Superpowers collection from the 80s.
Just get at it, son. Like, just get it done.
Where do I got space? Look behind me, and that shelf over there is even more packed.
I know.
Make it happen, right?
It's every time I buy something new, my wife's like, "Do you have room for that on the shelf?" So I'm like, "I'll figure it out." I'll figure it out. So
all my big stuff is in storage. So yeah.
Yeah. Right now, I'm in my Motu stuff. I'm starting to redo all the vehicles. So I just got a Land Shark, and I just got an aerator, and like a Road Ripper, and I'm getting a Roton next week, and I'm picking up my Roton. And I'm like, vehicles take up a lot of real estate. Right? You can squeeze Motu figures on the shelf really easy, but you put a Land Shark on there, and that's a big footprint. So you really got to make it work.
My Hiss tank has been moved around a whole bunch of times when I have my G.I. Joe shelf, because I like marching them in lines, in battle lines, and the Hiss tank, I'm always like, I could angle it this way, I'll just take it off the shelf. I'll put it back in, just back and forth. It's a constant struggle. Yeah.
But speaking of vehicles, I would say that to go back to our crown jewels, in talking about the Superpowers line, what the following line, the one that was almost a bootleg of it, was the Toy Biz Superheroes line that came out in '89.
Oh yeah.
Attached to that Batman movie. But to this day, I think that Toy Biz Batmobile is like a perfect Batmobile.
Yeah, because it's you're talking about the Batman movie one, right? Like that style, right? I almost said Batman Returns, but I don't think that came out till '92. So.
Yeah, and by the time they did that, they were doing Kenner, and the Kenner one was actually more movie accurate, but the something about the Toy Biz one being out first and having the open cockpit, and it was just like a perfect toy.
Yeah, I have a bit of a hazy memory because I saw the Kenner one more recently, so I'm gonna have to check images online to remember the Toy Biz. But I should know this because I know I've held it in hand sometime in the last number of years, but
Yeah.
I'm starting to mix it up. So.
But if you get that one, you can put those really cheesy Toy Biz figures around it, and it's a great display because that Batmobile is such a cool crown jewel, right? Like it's so like just iconic.
Absolutely.
It's massive, right? I as a kid, I remember the trunk opened up. I could fit like 5 or 6 figures in the trunk, and I was like, it's crazy how big this trunk is. But yeah, so we actually in an upcoming video, I'm going to be restoring a Toy Biz Batmobile, and then we're going to race with a ramp we've built. The super.
Oh, that's cool.
And the Toy
That's
Biz.
really cool. Yeah, you know your videos. I wanted to mention. I don't know anybody else who does the way you do it with the, you do like 3-minute histories at the beginning and then you jump into a project. I don't know, like where did you get that formula? Like did anyone else do that?
Just what I was doing, I was just fixing stuff up, and my buddy Steve was like, hey, we should make a show out of this, and I was like, okay, let's do that, because I'm kind of a do-it-yourself kind of guy, and I just like doing that. And then so we put together our first episode, and I was like, we need an intro. Like it was just the project, and it felt kind of real stark and cold. So Steve wrote the Superpowers intro. He was like, hey, I wrote an intro. We should just maybe do a voiceover, read over it or whatever. And so he came and he filmed me doing it. And so he edited our Superpowers video. He edited that one together for me. And then he says, I think this is the format that's going to work. And I said, okay.
It does.
And since then, I just took his blueprint and I was like, I'll just reproduce that over and over again. So he
know what that does, right? Is guys like me who don't have the talent, and I have no problem saying this. I'm a talentless bum when it comes to DIY. Just to disassemble a transformer, because the Galvatron from Studio 86 came with misassembled shoulders. A lot of them left the factory that way. Yeah. I sent it to our common friend Peter Horvath. I'm like, can you fix this? And I'm like, it's a 6-minute fix on YouTube. I'm like, yeah, but like butterfingers and lack of patience. So he does it, right? But like, so for me, when I listen to your histories, it's very relatable, right? Because I love that stuff, the type of stuff I produce for my channel, right? But then seeing the DIY fixes after adds a layer of talent and craftsmanship and like tutorial to it, right? Obviously, I haven't been influenced enough by it because I just, I give up too easily, right? Something breaks, anything more than crazy glue, I'm like, okay,
I appreciate those. Those are very, very, very kind words. And again, my favorite thing is when somebody sends me a picture of a fix they've done to one of theirs using our recipes. Like that to me,
absolutely.
like I love that. And
absolutely.
So, I think that in this hobby, there's lots of really, really good people. But there's also a lot of like weird competition. There's a lot of like gouging guys. There's a lot of there can be a lot of guys that don't represent our hobby well. And
yeah,
when you see somebody that's just in there and just having fun with it, like really just having fun, and we can see that there's YouTubers that do it that they don't look like they're having fun doing what they're doing. And if toy collecting is going to be a burden to you, then find another hobby. Like just nobody should spend time doing something that they really don't enjoy doing.
Oh yeah, I mean, on a very related topic, I was once at a toy show and I had my spare Masters of the Universe Classic Prince Adam for sale. And somebody came up to me and basically accused me of being a fake. And I'm like, literally asked me, or not even asked me, just told me, that's fake, right? I'm like, huh? That's fake. No, it's real. I knew what he was getting at, but I didn't want to give him any quarter on it, right?
Right.
And he's like, well, when was it released? I'm like, well, in 2000. So it's fake. I'm like, it's real. It's not original. So it's fake. And it's like he had to win this argument with me. And I'm kind of like, well, if all you want is a win, why don't you just say it's fake, get the last word, and walk away? Yeah. Take the win. I don't need it. I don't, right? I don't have to win this argument, right? Yeah. I'm not going to change your mind. There's no point. It's not that important. If you want to say that I own fakes, it doesn't change how I'm going to collect it, right? No. And that's exactly like you said with the competition. He had to win that argument with me, and I'm just like, here's my white flag. I'm going to wave it.
Yeah.
I hope the victory was worth it for you, because I'm pretty sure it was a pretty hollow victory getting the last word on a guy who didn't want to argue. So
yeah. No, I went to a toy show a month or so ago, and I've made up a bunch of our fixes. So like the He-Man harness and Hordak's cape and Buzz Off wings. Like I made a bunch of them up and I just packaged them and I had them for a couple bucks on a table. I was like, I'll just promote GoFigure that way and we'll kind of do a thing. And a couple people were like, oh, these are repro. I'm like, 100%. They're repro and they're not even like, I wouldn't even call them repro because they're not going to fool anybody. But they're just going to take like a naked He-Man and make him not naked anymore, and that's okay. We can like, I'm charging you $4 for it, so I think we'll be okay. Like, there's no reason to fight here.
Yeah, and that's an argument that's always going to go in circles.
Yeah.
Right. You know, I don't position myself at all as, and I'm worried about alienating part of my audience here, but I don't position myself as anti-repro at all.
Yeah.
When I was a
guy with the
college
rock
student,
firing Boba Fett.
Oh, okay, so we already knew. What am I talking about? I tried to douchebag my way into it, and even then I couldn't hold my smile for 3 seconds. So you already knew, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, like when I was a college student and I found some repro Transformers parts, I jumped at it because I just didn't have much disposable income. Over the years, I replaced almost every repro piece, but that happened very organically. You know, I never had a mind shift that was like, oh, I hate repro. I didn't switch that mindset. I just replaced it on an opportunistic basis, and I don't even know if I have. Looking at my Transformer shelf, there's not much. There's almost no repro left there, but there's still 1 or 2 pieces, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not ashamed of it. And you know, if I'd never found the pieces to replace them, then it'd be fine. Like I know what I have and I know what I don't have. I keep a spreadsheet of what it is and what it isn't. You know, if I pass away before my wife, hopefully she knows. But again, this is a circular argument. Thankfully, I'm listening to somebody who is nodding with me. But if we really got into it, it's a circular argument that again I would walk away from.
Yeah, no, I'm not spending my time fighting over something that doesn't matter.
Yeah, and ultimately it doesn't to me, right? I mean, even most toy shows you go to, the rule is if you sell something that's counterfeit, label it.
Yeah,
label
right.
And people should be able to tell by the price. But again, you know, I hope people aren't rolling their eyes too much at these statements of mine. So I'm not saying this to be unpopular. I'm just saying it because it's what I practice, right?
If everybody was honest, there would be no anti-repro fight.
That's true.
Right?
That's true.
That's it. So can we be talking for about an hour here? So I don't want to keep it too much longer, but I will ask you this. What is the holy grail you're currently on the hunt for?
This one is a dagger through the heart because I almost had a chance at it. All right. Diaclone pre-transformer in the box Optimus Prime.
Okay.
That is it. And what happened was I had just purchased Generation 1 Great Shot from the Victory series and the Generation 1 Grand Maximus from the Master Force series, both of which are, let's just say they're not cheap.
Right.
When I got those and paid for them, all of a sudden somebody was like, hey, you want to buy this Diaclone Optimus? And it's the first time I've seen one turn up locally since 2003. And I'm like, I got to pass this up because I have spent so much already on these other 2 pieces. And there's nothing wrong with those 2 pieces. The 2 pieces I got, some people actually value, or not necessarily evaluate dollar-wise more, but they like them more, right? Because those are holy grails as well, right? Like you don't hear anyone have, I mean, it took me almost 20 years to get those 2 figures, right? So when the Diaclone Optimus popped up and I wasn't able to get it, I was like, I kind of cringed a little bit. Because the first time I had the chance, the guy was asking about $600 in 2003, but I was a student.
Right.
So now they're asking a lot more than that, different seller, and I couldn't splurge because of what I had just splurged on.
Right.
So, what about you?
So I have 2, and they're different ends of the spectrum. So one is the Dick Tracy blank, and again, it's a very common one. I've seen one in the wild one time, but it was $1,000. And
I was gonna say
it's
still worth a lot.
It's worth so much money that it's out there. And so another one is not a hard figure to find at all. But I'm looking to find a cop's bulletproof, but with no coat. I want him just naked, so I can make a coat for the show. I have a design ready to go. I have that done up. So oftentimes I'm like, hey, who's got a bulletproof? And I'll go all kinds of offers. The guys like, I got one mint, got them on card, I got all this stuff. I'm like, oh, I just want the basic figure. I don't want the rest of it. And it's been harder to find one incomplete than I can find a complete one. So But one day I'll come across them in a bin somewhere.
You've got a lot of toy shows there in Ontario, so you'll be able to.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe we've been talking for an hour. It feels like it's been about 15 minutes, to be honest.
Absolutely. But
it really goes by fast.
Yeah, so we'll do this on your show next time.
We probably should. I should probably figure out how to stream. Maybe I should. But you know what? If it's Skype, I think I can just record. We definitely should try this. I've not tried an interview on my channel yet.
Well, there you go. Your channel's great. So anybody who hasn't seen Ken's channel, I'll put the link in the description here. Is Toy Kennections, and he's got an incredible collection. He does incredible toy histories, and he goes deep dive sometimes. So it's great stuff. So check him out. And Ken, it's been great having you on. Thanks so much.
I appreciate it, man.